On your table, you're going to notice that there's 2 pages printed out for the bio for our local speaker, retired Major Stephen Kintzley. And rather than me read through that, I just want to introduce him the way that I feel that I know him. Major Kintzley and I have crossed paths through our children over the course of years, but never really got to know each other until we sat down to talk about him sharing his testimony here. And I don't know if he knows this, but every year over the last 5 years, Rick Hartman, who we mentioned earlier, would always put his name on the list for the local speaker. So Rick, I'm sorry you're not here, but I know you're looking down on us right now, and we listened to you, brother, I promise. It just took a little time. So Major Kintzley is a servant leader to the nth degree, not only in his time in service spanning over 2 decades of combat, but also in his time serving these cadets. His tireless work and his courageous leadership are impacting future generations. Those that a lot of us in this audience have concerns for, we have men like this that give me hope to lead these young men and women into a future filled with faith, hope, and certainty, and not confusion, chaos, and untruth. So at this time, I'd like to introduce retired Major from the U.S. Marine Corps, Stephen Kintzley.
Thank you. I have to have notes. Phil told me if I go over 20 minutes, they're going to pull me off the stage. So I'm going to give you a part of my story. It is definitely not the full story, but hopefully you can take the journey with me as I go through this. Proverbs 16:3 tells us, commit to the Lord whatever you do, and he will establish your plans. Every kid when they're young, just like all of us, you always have plans when you're growing up. People are saying, hey, what are you going to do when you get older? What are you going to do? And, a lot of people want to be doctors and nurses. Now the big thing for kids is I want to be famous. I don't even know what that means, but I don't want to be famous. I think that drags you in a different direction. But at an early age, I decided I want to be a Marine. Well, how did I get there? Well, my dad was in the Marine Corps. He served in Vietnam, and every once in a while he'd pull out this old musty chest and he'd have some things in there and he'd start telling me about him, and the stories were just mesmerizing to me. And then I looked at his physical and mental toughness. I was like, that's what I want to do. And then he pulls out this piece of shrapnel that was pulled out of his back from Operation Hastings in 1966 in Vietnam. And still on it, you can see it's probably about a 2-inch piece of shrapnel, still some blood on it, pieces of his t-shirt. And something about that made me want to be a Marine. I don't know what it is, but so I was drawn to that, and which led to the day after I graduated from high school, I was off the recruiter picked me up and I was off to basic training. First 4 years in the Marine Corps, I spent 3 years deploying and just constant deployments to Operation Desert Storm in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, and then into Somalia in support of Operation Restore Hope, which a lot of you know during the Black Hawk Down time. I got there about 10 days after that event had happened. So I started feeling this, pride. I was coming back. I was alive. The Marines, we were tough. And I started feeling this pride, and I would thank God. Hey, thank you for letting me stay alive. But I was like, hey, look at this. I'm starting to get medals and ribbons and all this kind of stuff, and I look like a war hero. And that was what defined me. So then they sent me to one of the toughest schools I've ever been. And Biff Gore's an Army soldier as well. He probably is familiar with Army Ranger School. I went through that, and out of 450 who started the school, 38 graduated together. That's an 8% graduation rate. And I was a distinguished honor graduate, one of 2 Marines in the school. And now it was, thank you, God, but hey, check me out. Pride gets in the way of a lot. And you start realizing that we are not in control of anything. And so I applied for a commissioning program. I said, well, I'm enlisted. I want to be an officer. And that was always one of my big things. Hey, I want to be a general. I didn't even know what generals did. I just know people made them coffee. And so get through life pretty easy when other people do your work. So I had applied for a commissioning program, very competitive. I got it. It sent me down to the University of Arizona, where I was active duty through college, and upon graduation, you get your commission. During that time, I was in the best shape of my life. Somebody introduced me to this thing called a triathlon, and I started running those for the next 3 years, and it actually became pretty competitive. Academics were going well, would ultimately graduate magna cum laude, so I had pretty good grades going through that. Skydiving, I was doing everything. I was living the life in college. And I'd always gotten these subtle calls throughout college to the ministry. And I was like, oh, heck no. I mean, okay, I'll go to church more. I'd go to church. I would do those things. I prayed at night, prayed a little bit more, but something was still there, but it conflicted with my plans. I was like, this isn't I'm supposed to be a Marine. 6th grade, I decided to be a Marine. So I was like, oh, no, that ain't going to happen. So kind of my life-changing part there that I just think of it, if you're picturing it, Jesus getting his big hand and smacking me across the face. A bunch of Marines were going down to Rocky Point, Mexico for Labor Day weekend. This is my final semester in college, getting ready to graduate and be commissioned. And so they're like, hey, you want to go? And I'm not much of a partier, never had alcohol in my life. I know you guys are like, what a prude. But I just never was drawn to anything like that. But I was, I could make sure they come back from Mexico safely and everything. And so I said, oh, what the heck, let's go. So we caravan down to Rocky Point, Mexico. And when we got there, grabbed something to eat. Our plan was just to sleep on the beach. So I brought a little cot in my truck, set it up outside of the truck. And it was almost instantly that, Lord, thank you. Almost instantly, a pain came to my chest. I thought I was dying. It felt like a rib was stabbing in my lung. I was like, what is going on? Labored breathing. And I asked some of the Marines, Semper Fi means always faithful, but not this day. I said, hey, who can drive back with me? I don't think I'm going to make it. They're like, no, man, we're staying here. They said, just stay the night, you'll be fine. So they all slept. I heard them snoring and everything else. I was up all night just trying to get a breath. And just the pain was so excruciating. I started sweating and it was all clammy. Next morning, I said, guys, I got to go. So I got in my truck, drove 4 hours back up to Tucson. I hit the Border Patrol. They didn't even ask me for an ID. The guy's like, what the heck is wrong with you? I said, I don't know, man. I think I'm dying. And he's like, hey, just go on through. So I get back up to Tucson. The Air Force base was closed at the time due to the long break, the weekend break. So I went to St. Mary's Hospital. And when I get into St. Mary's, all you got to do if you want to get into the emergency room faster, just say you can't breathe. So they took me right back. The doctor, they take the x-rays and ran a couple tests, rudimentary tests, but he comes back out with a film and he says, it looks like you have a tumor on your lung. I was like, I'm a triathlete, man. I can't have a tumor. I'm graduating in 4 months. I'm getting my commission, and that's not in the plan. So it was denial. And that was really tough for me. He just told me to go to the Air Force Base once the weekend was over, and so I did. Went in there, and the doctor ran me through a whole litany of tests to rule out just about everything that he could imagine that it was. And once they all came up negative, he said, now I'm concerned. So he sends me to the VA, and the VA is much more robust, and so they run some tests in there, and a lot more tests, including a CT scan. And after they did the CT scan, I came back, and the doctor, he sits me down, he goes, have a seat, and he pulls out this book, and there's a bunch of colored images in it, and he lays my imaging right next to the book where it says it has cancer in it. He says, what do you think? I said, it looks exactly the same. I go, well, that can't be. So I continued on and would go in for every probably 3 or 4 days into the Davis-Monthan Air Force Base Hospital or clinic, continue to get x-rays. They didn't change. They looked the same. It was a very large thing on my right lung. And we had started the process of going through, what the different treatments for cancer and everything were. And I was like, this is not going the way I planned it. And there was still an element of denial. Till finally one night, it was probably about 30 days, 35 days into it. So just after my 27th birthday, I was getting ready to go to bed one night and walked into my room, 1-bedroom apartment, and I got on my knees. And I submitted like I didn't think you could. This was total submission. I wasn't asking for something. I was giving everything. I didn't give it up. I just turned it over. I didn't even know what that meant until I got that slap in the face. Next day I woke up, just as usual. I had an x-ray planned. I went into Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, same x-ray tech that had been there for 10 x-rays before, and started doing the imaging. And she says, hey, I need to redo these. Now I have long lungs, so I thought, okay, maybe it was that. She said, I have to redo these. I said, okay. Started laughing with her and stuff. And after she took it again, she goes, okay, go just wait for the doctor. So I went in there, sat in the chair. Finally, the doctor comes in, and the first thing he says when he walks through the door is he goes, wait, what did you do? I go, what do you mean? Answering a question with a question. He says, there's nothing on your lung. He put that's when they had the big films. You remember those old days? And just put it up in the light, and I looked at it, and I was like, well, that's weird. And it didn't even occur to me what I had done the night before. As I'm driving back, that's when I was like, I think I know I understand what just happened. I'm a cancer survivor. I mean, for me, it was only a month and some change, but boy, it was hell. Still going to my classes. I mean, it was horrible. Kids were asking me as I'm going to my college classes, they're going, are you okay? As I'd go up some stairs, it's like, I think I'm going to be fine. But when I submitted, I told God I would do anything. If you want to take me now, take me. If you want me to be a priest, I'll be a priest. If you want me to be a doctor, I'll be a doctor. If you want me to be homeless, I don't care. I am yours. I didn't realize the plan that he had for me, but I am more than happy to keep filling it. So fast forwarding a few years, you all heard of September 11, 2001, something big happened in this country, and that projected me back into the Middle East again for repeated deployments. And while I was there, the first go around, I had some Marines that were atheists, and I don't know if anybody's seen the movie Siege of Firebase Gloria. Lee Ermey says, there's no such thing as atheists in a combat situation. And people start changing. They look at the way they view their view on life, and I could tell that some of them wanted to believe, but they didn't know how. Then on my second deployment, it was much hairier than the first one. And one of the things I started doing was praying with members of my platoon. And multiple miracles were occurring, and the Marines were seeing it. They're like, this is no joke. Everything from people ducking down right when I tell them, hey, get down, and a piece of shrapnel flies over their head, or enemy fire comes from the rear after I tell Corporal Tarian to move, like fractions of a second right before. But I'm going to share one thing with you, one story that will tell you, and for anybody that's doubting the power of submission and giving everything to God, I'm going to tell you that it is real. And this story might help you out. In this old city of Najaf in Iraq, it's an ancient city. It's the third most holy city for Shia Muslims in the world. During that time, we ended up being on top of a building. And if you look at the image there, you can see the small wall. It looks like Corporal AVAC's pointing to that. About 3.5 inches wide. You can really get that wall if you wanted to and just push it down. It's on top of a roof, 3-story building. And we'd been fighting there for, at this point, about 2.5 days. And there was one guy who, I don't know what was protecting this guy, but we couldn't kill him. He was He'd come out and he'd shoot RPGs at us. And ultimately, I sent everything in there. I mean, I had a couple snipers with me, AVAC's one of them, but the timing, he was never looking through the rifle when he would come out and shoot it, come around the corner about 200, 300 yards away. And so we'd send tanks in there, Hellfire missiles from Cobra helicopters. Some Army Bradleys were in the area. They helped us out. I was like, it's got to kill this guy. Nothing would. That didn't make any sense. So after sending all of this last barrage through there, I was like, he's surely gone. We had to have gotten this guy. So we got a little bit complacent. The firefighting had gone a little bit away from where our position was. We can hear it more in the distance. And we're standing, a few of us standing along that wall, looking over. And lo and behold, here he comes with an RPG. And he shoots it, comes right at us, and hits that wall right below where we're standing. And it fell to the ground. Corporal Meinhold took this picture, and at first I was like, that's kind of dumb. That's an unexploded RPG round. The one that was meant for me and for my Marines. And when Corporal Meinhold looks over at me, he's got these eyes bigger than you can imagine. The only words that came out of my mouth were, that's not an accident. And like Phil said, it's not a coincidence. This happened over and over and over again. Submitting. Out of all the units that were there, we're the only one that came back with no killed in action. The more and more we'd pray, the more and more platoon members would come in. They were transforming in combat, and they still do that today, which is a blessing. This is only the beginning of my story. So what can we all take away from this? One is, listen when you're called. You're all called to something. But the ways of the world, you listen to it and you start following those and say, this is what's real. It's not. Phil threw $50 on the floor. Means nothing. You can't take that stuff with you. He will provide. He'll take care of you. And we're talking about a God that can cure cancer. Psalm 94 tells us, if today you hear his voice, harden not your heart. And how do you listen? Ask. Lord, I need you. Those are the words that you need to say. Lord, I need you every single day of your lives. Wake up, go to bed, during the day. Lord, I need you. He'll take care of you. If you want a good model for this, besides myself, there's this guy called Jesus. In the Garden of Gethsemane, at the beginning of his passion, three times he kneels, bleeding from the pores. And he says, if it be possible, take this chalice from me. But immediately resigning to his Father's will, he says, not my will, but yours. And that is what we need to do every day. It's not my will, it's not my plan, but yours. The ways of the world will take you different ways. There's many business owners, leaders, everything in here. You've gone your way. Bring Jesus into your life. Bring him into your business. Bring him into your kids. Everybody that you know, you have to bring it in there. Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and he will establish your plans. Submit to his authority, and you will have real truth and real life. Thank you very much, and God bless you all.